A brown woman can't say, actually, in my opinion, what happened during the British Empire was evil. That's it.
That's not.
But you don't want to talk about the evil history of the Indian slave trade that your ancestors took part in, Narinder, do you? There's something really strange about people who benefit from Britain and yet constantly attack it. And that seems to be how Narinder Kaur makes her living these days. I mean, just watch this.
Americans think British people are so sweet, which is crazy because British people are truly the most evil people in history. Like, they are Thanos. Britain is Thanos.
Go to
like,
a museum, guys.
Yeah, they owe 43 trillion to India.
Maybe.
Narinder, surely Jamila Jamil's comments are completely indefensible. Good morning.
Sorry, what do you mean they're completely indefensible? In her opinion, and remember, we've got freedom of speech, she's talking about the British Empire and the impact it had on her family. And she feels that if she feels that the empire history is evil, that's her opinion.
Yeah, but she wasn't just talking about empire. She said the British people, you and me, are the most evil in history.
No, because then she would include herself. And she's not obviously including herself. She's not saying we are the most evil. An estimated 165 million people murdered, raped, stolen from, abused. You've got 3 to 10 million people killed in an engineered famine by Winston Churchill.
Oh, no, don't start with the Bengal famine. It was not engineered by Winston Churchill, Narinder.
Actually, a brown woman can't say, actually, in my opinion, what happened during the British Empire was evil. That's it.
That's not what she said. That's not what she said. She said the British people are the most evil people in history.
You need to watch the whole podcast then.
Literally, what she said.
The British Empire did some atrocious things. You don't seem to be able to accept this. And I think that a lot of people need educating to the truth of what this country did do. Only 100 years ago, it ended in 1947.
Well, the point is,
so if you had some nice, polite Brits in America during the World Cup, and the Americans said, oh, the British people are lovely people, Jamila Jamil and Narinder Kaur think it's necessary that you remind them that, no, the British historically did some evil things. They're really evil people. And notice how they connected you seeing a British person and thinking they're quite nice with their history. So it's almost like that you have to walk around with a badge of shame because of some evil things that your ancestors did. But does that apply to all cultures? Because if we were to play that game, I don't think Narinder Kaur and people like her, people who want to tear down Britain and play this woke narrative, would be too happy. Because you look at countries like Pakistan right now, where they still currently have blasphemy laws in place. A student was sentenced to death because of WhatsApp messages he made about the Prophet Muhammad. And so should Pakistani people in the UK wear that as a badge of shame, that they come from such an oppressive and dystopian regime, a country that does some of these things, and Muslims that do these kind of things? Should they wear a badge of shame as well, Narinder Kaur? Or how about black people, West Africans in particular? You may have heard of the Benin Kingdom. Benin Kingdom, a very powerful kingdom in the past, covers a lot of modern day Nigeria now. What you may not know is that very same kingdom actually engaged in slave trade well before the Brits came along. In fact, it's well known, well, maybe it's not well known, that between June and October in their years, between 5 and 25 slaves and animals were killed every 3 to 4 days in the name of their deceased kings. Like, this was going on from the 6th century to the 19th century. So according to Narinder Kaur and Jamila Jamil, if we're going to be consistent, should West Africans wear that badge of shame and think about how their ancestors have done some evil and atrocious things? We've not even talked about the practice of leaving twins at the side of the road to die because they believed that they were cursed, until the Brits came along and ended that practice, Alad. You may have heard of the Mansa Musa, who was the head of the Mali Empire. Again, massive empire in Africa, covers modern day like Guinea, Senegal. At one point, Mansa Musa is said to have had 14,000 slave girls for his personal service. Let me make that bigger so you can see it. 14,000. And they would accompany him on his pilgrimage to Mecca. So as he was about to go and pay tribute to his God, he just had to bring his 14,000 slave girls. Now, should people from those regions carry that as a badge of shame because of what their ancestors did? How about Afghanistan? People from Afghanistan. A lot of the people who rock up on the boats on our borders come from Afghanistan. Should they wear it as a badge of shame that women are basically second-class citizens today in their country, that they struggle to access healthcare, that they are not allowed to go to school from secondary school, no university, that they're barely allowed to have jobs that only 1 in 4, not even 1 in 4, yeah, 1 in 4 women in Afghanistan are working or seeking work right now, that they're basically not allowed to feature in politics at all. Should the Afghanis that rock up on our shores, that Narinder is always, and people on the left are always defending, should they have to wear that as a badge of shame because of what their country's done? We could even talk about slavery in the Middle East, Northern Africa, and we could talk about the caste system in India, where Narinder Kaur's family comes from, where essentially the jobs and the social status and the rights you had access to were based on the family you were born in. How's that for individual freedom? How's that for individual liberty? I'll tell you, there is none whatsoever. So this idea that we need to go around constantly depicting and defining British people based on the worst of what their history has to offer, completely ignore any of the good that Britain as a nation has done around the world. Modern healthcare, antibiotics, the train, the steam engine, electricity, roundabouts, you name it. Common law in so many different countries, the modern concept of human rights, so many different things that Britain has exported around the world for good, to the good of many nations. We have to ignore all of that and instead just describe Britain as this evil country with this evil history, when you don't do the same thing to other countries. You don't do the same thing to people that come to this nation. And it just doesn't make sense to me that we could live in a country, benefit from the country, get the healthcare from that country, the education from that country, use the infrastructure of the country, the public services of that country, and yet constantly slander that country. Like, it makes absolutely zero sense. It's like saying, I really want to be here because I know in my heart of hearts that this is actually a fantastic country that, of course, has many flaws, but it's a fantastic country. But it's more profitable if I say it's not. I get invited on LBC if I say it's not. I get invited on GB News to be that token angry woke woman if I say it's not. And it's not going to fly anymore because we now don't feel ashamed to be proud of Britain. We don't feel ashamed to be proud to be of this country. We don't feel ashamed about, we acknowledge the past, but we also don't need to live in this constant self-flagellating guilt because you tell us to do so. And now, this isn't the only time that a woke celebrity was exposed live on TV. And if you want to see that happen again, check out the video on your screen. I'll see you there. Peace and blessings.